I'm Tom Hogan, by the way. I'm the chair of the poetry committee for the series. I'd also like to say happy to have you back again to Pauline Peterson. Pauline was our first reader last week. Thank you for being here, and you brought a guest.
I did. I brought a very honored guest. So please welcome Dorothy Stafford, who is here with us
Great. Thank you for being here. I would like to remind everyone that we do have a guest book here. So we would love to have you sign in. We would love to have the email address or a mailing address for you, because we are building a guest list and we are a series. There are other events, so we would like to, if you would like, notify you about events in the future. This series, too, is also funded in part by a grant from the Clackamas County Cultural Trust and the Oregon Cultural Trust. So we thank them. Gives me a lot of pleasure to introduce our poet and reader tonight. Kim has taught at Lewis and Clark since 1979, where he directs the Northwest Writing Institute and teaches writing. He also serves as the literary executor for the William Stafford Archive, which is helping readers and publishers to increase public access to William Stafford's writings. He's published extensively. If you look on his website, you can see a list of his publications. I'm going to just call your attention to a few. He's the author of Having Everything Right, Essays of Place, which has been reprinted in 1997. Wind on the Waves, 50 Tales of the Oregon Coast. Early Morning, Remembering My Father, William Stafford, 2002. The Muses Among Us, Eloquent Listening and Other Pleasures of the Writer's Craft, 2003. And 1,000 Friends of Rain, New and Selected Poems, 1976-1998, which has also been reprinted this time in 2005. And you may know that he was the recipient of the Oregon Book Award just recently, in 2007, the Stuart Holbrook Award, Literary Legacy Award. Would you join me in welcoming our reader tonight, Kim Stafford?
Thank you. Wow, what a privilege to be here with the most famous person in my life right in the front row. This is as good as it gets. And we better keep this short, you poor people standing in the back there. Of course, you can slip out if it gets boring, so you can relax. Well, I want to start actually with a text by our son, Master Guthrie. He's 10. This is the introduction to his report on the marsh. Here we are overlooking the water. Have you ever wondered what lies beyond the shrouding mists of the murky marsh? Does the marsh withstand its horrendous reputation, or is it something else, something unseen for untold generations? Are the ancient myths and legends true? Are the marshes full of primitive and bloodthirsty monsters, or is there a glimmer of hope, a glimmer of intelligence? Read on, or let the question drive you insane. And he said to his writing teacher, that sounds kind of like a sales pitch, doesn't it? I'm afraid so. Well, I'm teaching part-time at the Pacific Northwest College of Art, and we're making art about the war. We're writing poems in response to the war. So this was one of mine, honoring my fourth grade teacher, Miss Miller, Forest Hills, next to our house. Elementary lesson. Miss Miller, gentle wisp, my teacher in grade 4, told us one afternoon of the Fertile Crescent, the map's green place between blue threads, Tigris and Euphrates. The cradle, she said, of civilization. And my love for her became affection for lavish words like Mesopotamia. hanging gardens of Babylon, Eden, Arabian Nights, and Ur. If we don't get the story right, she said, Scheherazade will die. In war, the maps don't show this place. How can we get the story right? One more chance to get it right. In green zone, shock and awe, depleted uranium half-life doom of 1,001 nights of war. Miss Miller, tell them what you told us then. Between the waters, people learned to get along. Alphabets and grain and stories were the money of those days. Children, find in your big hearts that place where we began. Miss Miller, wherever you are, thank you. Well, I had a student in one of my classes a couple years ago who came up after class and said, sort of as if she was were telling a trade secret of some kind, she said, I think our town should have something just called Citizens College. And you wouldn't get a degree, and you wouldn't pay. There would just be people coming together to teach each other things. And you know, here we are in a town with a poet on the city council. Imagine what might happen. So you know, what we writers do, we say, well, I'll just write a description of that, and then maybe it'll happen. So this is called Citizens College. One class is 5 women having tea. They compose a letter of reconciliation. One class is 10 soldiers returned. They walk along the river together. One class is 3 elders, 3 children. They prepare testimony about the library. One class is 15 experts in forestry, learning to listen to music. We help each other learn to help. What is our story in this place? How can we be together here? We meet in homes, under trees, early morning, after retirement. Our curriculum is paying attention, learning to listen and to speak, writing together to heal the world. So I'll just check back in a year or so and see if it's happened, see if it's started. Well, I want to read this little series here. We had an idea. You know, this is one way we could have Citizens College. There's a woman who took a class from me who runs Hot Lips Pizza. I don't know if we have any Hot Lips Pizza fans. You know, and they're very into local, sustainable. You know, if only we could replace pineapple, everything would come from 100 miles away, you know. That's their quest. And they have 35 local farmers, you know, backing their trucks up to their place on Hawthorne and so on. And so Gina said, let's have a writing workshop at the pizza parlor. You know, it doesn't open till 11, so we'll meet there and we'll just write like crazy about food. And toward the end of the workshop, we'll begin to smell the pizza, and then we will eat. So we did that, and I want to read a few poems or a few little things I wrote in that gathering. She calls it Hot Lips University. Yeah, why not? So these are, first, just some lines from the class. You know, as other people are reading their pieces, I'm just writing down lines that I admire. The next batch was perfect. Love, lay your hand on the waxen shoulder of the squash. I made a list of everything I won't be able to smell in prison. Refusing to eat is a direct rejection of one's mother. Last words. Quick, the dessert. I feel I'm fading. A man lost in the kitchen may master an omelet. I reject anything hardened that once was hot and moving. I listen for Bob's car, not wanting it on my breath when he returns. It's a little ode to peanut butter. John Walker and Jack Daniels, the only Gentiles my father ever loved. So you can see, it was kind of a fun workshop, you know. So This is one of the pieces I wrote called Family Pizza. Sundays, my father got up early to make the dough. His hands knew the recipe: yeast, flour, water, salt. All morning, the dough was praying in the bowl, the towel over its belly rising. At noon, we gathered to gather colors, flavors. Mother rolled the circles thin. Father grated Tillamook. Brother opened anchovies. Sisters spread tomato paste. And I cut onion, crushed oregano. The waiting that happened next, that was sacred time. Heaven could be like this. You love your kin. Something amazing has been prepared for you. You mill around in the kitchen. That was sort of heaven there. I guess maybe this is a counterpart. I'm just sort of charging through these because I'm just feeling bad for those people standing in the back. But this is another food one, remembering this homeless man who stopped by for several weeks. And, we fixed him a wonderful dinner, and he pulled a spoon out of his shirt pocket and delivered a long soliloquy addressed to the spoon. It's really wonderful. So this is called We Invite the Wanderer to Dinner. From his pocket, he slips a spoon and mutters to it, "Remember our long years together, little friend, since your liberation at that cafe in Barstow? We are one stop on the Odyssey. Potatoes grow cold. Dusk falls. My father never forgave me for becoming a poet. Spoon, you know me better than my own kind." We stare in silent prayer as he begs the candle flame, "Mother, forgive me." And we got into this routine where he was looking for a place to live. So, we opened the classifieds at a long leisurely breakfast. We'd pick out a few spots. I'd drive him there, and he'd look around and say, "This isn't quite right." I'm very sensitive to noise and so on. So this went on for some time. Okay, this one, I'll get off the food in a moment, but this is called The Nature of Time at Irene's. Irene's is this fabulous restaurant in the French Quarter in New Orleans. I was in New Orleans after Katrina. Many houses still empty. Everyone's struggling to put things back together. One of the first places to reopen in the quarter was Irene's, that oval sign with jade green rim, Irene's. Inside, lots of people standing around. We asked the hostess, "How long will it be for a table?" Turns out this is a very Yankee question. How long, it just seemed that's what you ask in a restaurant, right? How long will it be for a table? "You from around here?" she said, her eyebrows rising. In the beat of silence that followed, I heard in my mind what she was too polite to say. "Because if you from around here, you would not ask how long. You would be here at the place you want to be. Irene's. You know Irene take care of you. Because what we serve you here is time. Pure time with honey, wine, etouffee, cumin, cayenne, searing your mind and creme brulee to put your sorrows all to sleep. Then the long finish that cognac summons. How long, you say? How long you want? Baby, how long you want?" Because down at another great French Quarter fixture, Café du Monde. Oh man, what a place where, the lady comes around with the coffee pot and she says, "You want anything more, baby?" Oh yeah, you bet. Okay, well, one more on food. Okay, sorry. The secret feast revealed. Teachers, we have this wonderful pantheon of students. Just our heroes, our saints. And you can always remember their names, but you remember their stories. So here's one of the stories from probably about 1984. What was her name? Lutetia? Lavon? Lulisha? Can't remember, well, would never forget how out of writing class she reveled, as if sputtering in a kettle of butter herself, her voice rising in crescendo of testimony to God as she read her account of the evening preparation of the midnight snack. 6 plump ears of corn, shucked, silk plucked with tweezers, boiled, peppered, salted, rolled hot in butter, and stacked like a pyramid of gold on a platter in the fridge. Then sleep. Dead sleep, heavy fatigue, hard to be an old black woman, she said, in a world white and young. Until around 2 a.m. she wakes and remembers and rises, pads down the stairs, opening the chrome-handled door where a slice of yellow light cleaves the dark to reveal abundant shimmer of gold. Glazed with aching pleasure, her tongue found, teeth crushed, soul drank, as she stood barefoot on the cold floor in the room where she grew old, loving the one flavor in this life that was hers alone for glory. Someday I'll meet her again. She quit teaching to open a catering business. We all thought that was a great idea. Well, I have this little piece. This is sort of leaving food behind, although it has a dinner table in it. Mediation. And this is a story told to me by a friend whose daughter had a T-shirt when she was in 6th grade that said mediator. And out on the playground, if there were an altercation, she would come up and say, "Would you like me to help solve the problem?" You know, I wish there were big people everywhere ready to do that. So mediation. At the dinner table, before the thrown plate, but after the bitter claim, in the one beat of silence and glare before the parents declare war, their child, who had been invisible, speaks. "Would you like me to help solve the conflict?" Silence. By the way, my friend telling me the story said her thought was, "No. I want to win. He's wrong." But she couldn't say that to her child. They cannot look at each other. Such a glance would sear the soul. They can't say no. They can't say yes. So the child speaks. 3 rules then. 1, you have to let the other finish. 2, you have to tell the truth. 3, you have to want to solve the conflict. If you say yes, we will solve the conflict. I love you. What do you say? You know, my friend said she realized if she says, I want to solve the conflict, they would solve the conflict. But she didn't want to. So, you know, young Eve had to, you know, work indirectly and so on. Well, let's see. I've been having these dreams. And I had this dream about this little gizmo. I couldn't quite remember what it looked like, but I remember what it felt like. It was all smooth and it felt very effective. So this is called Saving the World. In my dream last night, it was all so easy. With this gizmo in my hand, light as a feather, softly gleaming, I could vacuum hideous toxins here and spray them to banish trouble and sorrow over there. I could siphon anger from a terrorist, restoring him to father, brother, or son. And from fury, the gizmo could distill an elixir to soften cancer in a child. Governments can't make peace, but the gizmo could. Armies can't bring back laughter from the lost, but the gizmo did. The patent for this simple Stradivarius stood enshrined above the Constitution. It replaced the car, prison, money, and war. Some called it canto, ballad, alma, lieder, poema, lullaby. Everybody had one free. I feel like I could start a whole series of poems. In my dream, it was all so easy. You know, the dreaming mind the poet on the city council, the glance out the window at the sunset, the moment when you really listen to a child. You know, these are gizmos. These are saving graces. And everybody has them free. One time I was taking a shuttle from the airport into the University of Davis, California, and I fell into a conversation with a corn geneticist. This was way back at the beginning of all that, 1983, I believe. And she told me that they were trying to patent the corn genome. And she said the first person that gets that is going to be a gazillionaire. And just the whole concept seemed so strange to me. Didn't corn know it first? You know, how does this work? But she got talking about these two people in her profession. You know, so here are all these scientists, and they'd be in a room like this, and one of them would be up front reporting on some research findings. And there was this one person who just helplessly would shout out in the middle of the presentation the flaw in the research design. And they called this person the killer. You know, he couldn't help it. He just could see the gap. He could see what was wrong. But then she said, fortunately, there was another person they called the yenta. And when someone was reporting their findings on some little study, the yenta would suddenly get all excited and begin pointing out how deeply important this research was. And often the researcher would say, "It is? Really? I didn't know that." But, you know, the yenta was this connector. So I realized, you know, that's kind of, I've got one of each of those in my own mind. You know, I've got one that says, "Oh, no, Kim, this will never work." And the other one says, "Oh, come on, you know, give it a whirl." So this poem is called The Killer and the Yenta. It's an ordinary day. We are gathered at the table for tea or stories. We're in a meeting at work or at home for supper. The conversation trills and wanders when trusting souls begin to offer their tentative visions. One strident voice cuts in. "Your dream is flawed, won't work, is dead." We call this dark voice, helpless with its own skill, the killer. There is another exuberant voice then saying, "But do you realize how all this goes together?" The yenta sees what is not quite there, then is suddenly clear. In each family, each profession, and each wrestling mind, these two bicker, adore, fight for our allegiance. It's a matter of life and death. One says, "No. Failure, die." The other says, "Yes, beauty, marry, and thrive." And you know what the other person, the scientist said was, we'd be lost without both. You know, so left hand, right hand. Okay, let's see. I have kind of a strange thing here. I just got an email half hour before I came over here from the mother of one of my students. And she said, "Ben tried to swim across the Willamette from Milwaukie, and the police have taken him to the psychiatric hospital." A poet. So I had to write a poem for Ben. For Ben, my student, who tried to swim the river at Milwaukie. He wanted to be one of the beats. He wanted whiskey to flame his tongue. He wanted to find the poetry scene he had imagined, reading Kerouac and drinking Jack Daniels and writing forever through the night. He wanted to invite everyone on the street to his birthday party, to stay up all night chanting, learning, listening to what others could only hear through him. And then he wanted to cross the Willamette alone, swimming the awful rowing toward God, as only a poet would cherish to do, as the most reasonable thing to do under the circumstances of a world at war and secrets everywhere, and the way street lights knit the surface like silk or chain mail. So he plunged, flailed, to where the police saved him, stopped him, messed with him, folded his arms for the hospital. Ben, I think of you tonight, still swimming to the rhythm of poems you will hear because you are Ben, my friend, our wanderer, beyond the appearances. I think he's going to be okay. He just is a poet, that's all. He wants more. He's like a super yenta. It all fits together. You know, this was when they knew he had a problem, when he went down the sidewalk in Selwood, inviting everyone to his birthday party. I mean, that's what a 4-year-old would do, and we would cherish the impulse. And maybe we will again. Who knows? Well, I do need to sing a few songs just to open things up here a little bit. And I didn't have time to tune my guitar, so this is going to be folk music. Let's see here. Well, I have to start with Oregon folk song. Maybe some of you know it. In fact, we should learn the chorus. This is probably written back in the 1840s down on the coast. Alsea. How many people have been to Alsea? The windingest road in Oregon, I believe. And so the chorus goes, "Come, girls, come, listen to my noise. Don't you marry those Oregon boys. If you do, your fortune it'll be. Johnny cake and venison's all you'll see." And I was singing this song when I met my wife. So she was warned. Okay, so let's try that. Come, girls, come, listen to my noise. Come, girls, come, listen to my noise. Don't you marry those Oregon boys. Don't you marry those Oregon boys. If you do, your fortune it'll be. If you do, your fortune it'll be. Johnny cake and venison's all you'll see. Now, Johnny cake, you know, they'd have the barrel of flour, as Miss Miller taught me. And they'd nest their eggs down in there, and then if the eggs broke, they'd just pull the shells out and stir it up right in the flour, and that'd be a Johnny cake, you know, throw it in the griddle. So we'll come back to that chorus. When they go a-milking, they milk it in a gourd, hide it in a corner and strain it with a board. Some gets a little and some gets none. That's how things in the Oregon run. So come, girls, come, listen to my noise. Don't you marry those Oregon boys. If you do, your fortune it'll be. Johnny cake and venison's all you'll see. To take you to a side-hewed wall without any windows in it at all. Sandstone chimney and a puncheon floor, a clapboard roof and a button door. So come, girls, come, listen to my noise. Don't you marry those Oregon boys. If you do, your fortune it'll be. Johnny cake and venison's all you'll see. Every night before you go to bed, they build up a fire as high as your head. Rake away the ashes and they'll throw a great big chunk of old sourdough. When they go a-milking, let's see, we already did that one. They take you to a meadow that looks like a bog. Every milk cow out standing on a log. Rain coming down and the rivers rise. Fish like hell and make up lies. So come, girls, come, listen to my noise. Don't you marry those Oregon boys. If you do, your fortune it'll be. Johnny cake and venison's all you'll see. So one thing about that song, it brags about what is difficult. You know, a lot of the old songs, we brag about what's hard. And someone told me when our son was born, you know, if you can teach your son to love what is difficult, he'll be okay. So, well, now there is a long-term educational goal. I love what is difficult. But I have another version of that idea. I was out at Sun River with my wife's people. We rented a condo, and then we performed an economics experiment to see how far down the per-person cost could go if we packed a whole bunch of relatives into this place. You know, so we just had a whole bunch of people. And then the question was, well, what could we do that everybody would enjoy? Well, I can't go skiing. You know, I got some little imps with us, and we can't spend the whole day at the playground. You know, the teenagers get bored, and the museum's good for a while, and so on. So we finally ended up, we'll take the sleigh ride, you know, out beyond the airport. They had this blacktop bike path going around, little hummocks of snow here and there. And there was an old horse named Big John. And there was this sleigh that had little wheels on the runners. So if there wasn't any snow, it could just roll along the blacktop. And then it would come to the drifts and sort of work its way up over. But the best part of all was this old cowboy, Clint Skinner. And so, you know, we're driving along, and my daughter's very, very bored, and, you know, Guthrie's too young to know what's going on, and, you know. But it's a beautiful day, I'm having a great time, and so I start talking to Clint, and I say, so, Clint, where are you from? Idaho. Oh, what part? The part where there isn't anybody. So, well, do you miss it? Yeah. What do you miss? The part about not anybody. You know, he had about a quarter of a twinkle in his eye. And I said, so how's Oregon treating you? Pretty good. Can't complain. And I said, where you living? He said, well, I fixed up one of the stalls in the stable. I like being near the horses. You know, and then he gave the reins a shake and he said, walk on, Big John, walk on. And I thought, my gosh, we have been saying that to our horses for at least 1,000 years. You know, we took a carriage ride in Provence, and the Jules said, allez, allez, you know, walk on. So I got back to the condo, and I started thinking about stories about horses in our family. And Mother will correct me, hopefully later, in private, if I get this wrong. But the way I remember it, we had these horses. And there's a part in Bopham's diary, my grandma's diary. It starts out, mercy, but we all felt blue this morning. She was the poet of her generation. Mercy, but we all felt blue this morning. I tell you, it means something to give up one's darling horses that you have rode, fed, petted, and worked for 12 years. But so comes an end to the things of the earth, and the sale began. You know, and she describes horse by horse as they're leading them away. But the other story that I learned from my Aunt Helen was that Grandpa saved the team for last. And finally someone came to the house and said, I want to buy your team. And Grandpa took a look at him and said, I'm not selling to you. Now, I don't know, was that true? You know, he sized up the person, and you're not good enough for my horses. So I realized, you know, as the song started, it was sort of a hymn, because I realized that when we knew how to live with horses, we had it perfect. But being humans, we didn't know enough to stop. Walk on, Big John, pull the children through the snow. Walk on, Big John, walk on. I find I'm living in a stable alone, with a bed of hay where I lay my bones. Walk on, Big John, walk on. Wind blows cold on my roof of tin. Nights I'm amazed by this life I'm in. Walk on, Big John, walk on. A gentleman asked me how I pray, with a Belgian horse and a blacktop sleigh. Walk on, Big John, walk on. I feel like sunset comes, this day is gone. Through the dark I lead Big John. Walk on, Big John. Big John, walk on. So, I wrote Clint a letter, and I said, Mr. Skinner, I seem to have made this song out of the things you told me, and I feel that I need to ask your permission to sing it, because it's really your song. And he wrote back and said, it's real neat to have a song wrote about you, but you didn't get it quite right about the Hames. There used to be this verse about the Hames, you know, the collar. And he started trying to explain about the Hames, and there was a big Emily Dickinson kind of dash in the middle of the postcard, and it said, but to explain that, I'd have to be a writer. So, you know, this kind of experience has led me to the following manifesto. In our time is a great thing not yet done. It is the marriage of Woody Guthrie's gusto to the internet. It is the composing and wide sharing of songs, poems, stories, blessings by those with voice for those with need. You know, I feel like there's this wonderful partnership. Some people carry a story for a long time, and then they come to Citizens College, whether it's a writing class, a writing group, a book group, a library, a conversation, and the story is passed on to someone who then tells it. Here's one example of that sentence I just love that I think I've quoted to a number of you before. I was sitting in a cafe in Powell, Wyoming, about 5 a.m. And this cowboy sat next to me. And we were sitting at the counter for a long time. You know how in the really great spots are these worn places for your elbows? It's kind of the pattern on the formica is gone because so many people are just sort of hunched. So we were hunched there, and you know, we take turn, you know, have a sip of coffee and just grimace, you know, so black and so bitter. And finally he turned to me and he said, son, you can go down to the variety store and get yourself a little bitty alligator, no bigger than a lead pencil, and feed him bits of hamburger every day for 100 years, and it won't grow tall, but you start giving him whole hamburger patties on a plate, and he'll turn into a goddamn monster overnight, and that's just what happened to our federal government. Now, you know, that's one of the sentences that even Miss Miller, bless her soul, might have tried to get me to shorten. In fact, one fun thing to do in writing class or in your own writing practice is write a run-on sentence. You know, it goes on for at least a page. Dashes are allowed, but semicolons are verboten. Okay, just keep going. Okay, I have this little manifesto. I mentioned the manifesto. Every once in a while I just have to write a manifesto. So this is called a manifesto on weakness. I have a weakness for the little towns, especially in the early morning when first light touches sidewalk and storefront in Bukoda, Cooley Dam, Washougal, Forks, Grays River, Twisp. In some sagging trailer on the mountain where the family left her, I have a weakness for an old woman trying to tell me secrets simply because I am younger and I am listening. I have a weakness for the dusty sentiments written, carved, painted, and stitched on the ceiling of the Wishram Tavern. How many people have been to the Wishram Tavern? It is worth, it's a destination spot. I hope is it still there?
10 years ago.
Okay, well, hey, time is relative. And for the world's largest rosary collection, where is it? Stevenson. I have a weakness for the youngest dancer in the arena of dust at Nespelem and the oldest tree along the bushwhack path of the Duckabush. I I have a weakness for that restless silver thread of water meeting land around the intuitive margin of Puget Sound. I have a weakness for a young boy or girl who falls silent in the middle of the lesson, not because the answer is beyond her reach or beyond his grasp, but because the question recalls the huge complexity of the world. When the news is dark and my own spirit falters, I feel weak and afraid. But soon it's morning, and I have a weakness for mornings. For my wife and son, my daughter, the tribe of our friends, and I have a weakness for that impossible, inevitable work I don't yet know is mine. You know, as my father said, your job is to find what the world is trying to be. Or, you know, as one of my students put it, you shouldn't choose your work by what you're good at, but by what makes you pay attention. How about that? You know, the thing that magnetically sort of draws your attention. That's your work. Well, gosh, time flies. I'll just do a couple more things. Song, sermon, prayer, blessing, lecture. You know, what are you in the mood for?
A dance.
A dance. Let's see, do I have that song? Well, now, see, you thought it was easy. Happy song, sad song, what do you like? Happy. Okay, happy. How about a sad song that's actually happy? Okay. So this is, I thought this song was my ticket to fame. And I had just read about the poor writer's copyright. You know, if you copyright officially, what is it now, $20, $25, the Library of Congress, you know. But the poor writer's copyright is you mail a copy to yourself. And then there's the postmark, the date, it's sealed. You know, it's proof that you had those lyrics on that date. So I mailed a copy of this song to Johnny Cash. And I mailed a copy to myself the same day, you know. Okay, you know, Johnny will pick it up, I'll have proof, you know, so, you know, I kind of forgot about it. And a few days later, I opened my mailbox, there's a letter. My God, Johnny's written back already. I tore it open, you know, but it was the one I mailed to myself. But many, many years later, at the Northwest Writing Institute, I got this letter on Albuquerque motel stationery. Kim Stafford, professor, Lewis and Clark College. So I opened it up, and the handwritten, really rough-looking scrawl. You know, Kim, I was doing a charity gig in Albuquerque, and I came across one of your songs. It's good. I want it. Johnny Cash. My first thought was, which one of my friends is, you know, fake this, what is, you know. So I went out to someone in the office, and I said, hey, Mary, do you recognize his handwriting? I mean, you get a lot of our correspondence. And she said, oh, that's Johnny. I mean, I've got all his albums. That's his signature. You know, it's the real thing. So with trembling hands, I dialed an agent in New York, and, you know, we had this long talk, and she used one of those, I think this was voted the ugliest phrase from the 80s. Maybe our people should talk to his people. Remember that? Isn't that bizarre? And, you know, I don't really know how to handle this, and you're in touch with him, so, you know. So then I came back out to the office, and Mary said, you know, he's at the Coliseum tonight with the Highwaymen. Chris Christopherson, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, and Johnny. What a lineup. So, you know, I my Visa card in hand, I got a ticket, it's a little high, you know, the day of the concert and everything. Went down there, and Johnny, you know, there's great little things they did together, but when Johnny came out alone, that deep, rich voice, and I thought to myself, with that voice and my material, you see, I'm a sucker. Anyway, so then afterward, out in the parking lot, there were the 4 buses. You know, they each had their own bus. And Johnny emerged with his handlers, you know, about 20 guys sort of making the way through the crowd. And when they opened the door for Johnny to get on his bus, about 20 people threw their cassette tapes through the door, with their songs. And I thought, Johnny and I are in touch. I don't really need to talk to him tonight. Well, so I waited, and I wrote back to Johnny, obviously. There was a national address, and I wrote back this letter about, should my people talk to your people? Well, about 2 weeks later, I got a call from one of my best friends from 4th grade. Kim, we were at this party, and we've been drinking a little. We thought you'd think it's funny. And so, I'm so sorry. Oh, that hurts. What I realized was, this is all in, I guess I've told this story many times, but what I realized was, I don't want to be famous, but the things that have come to me, I want them to be known. That's what publication is. It's not about you. It's about what has come to you, and you're passing it on. So this is the song. This is it. My old truck broke down at the edge of town. I turned the key, but she don't make a sound. I'll be walking along down the highway late tonight. Step into a cafe to pass the time. Grade B, that's friendly. Coffee's a dime. It's a cup of sweet coffee, stirred with a silver spoon. And there's a warmth that's left in the coffee cup when the coffee's been all drunk up, so my heart still holds a memory of you. Sweet black coffee is all dry and dry. Just the grounds I'm chewing is left behind, and I'm a hunched here holding the cold cup of my heart. Well, I put a pack of sugar in my pocket for the road. Better take two, if only I'd have knowed. It's worth getting a PhD just to, if only I'd have knowed what a woman can do to a man when he's all alone. I tried you with sugar, I tried you with cream, baby. I could use a warm up if you know what I mean, 'cause I'm hunched here holding the cold cup of my heart. Well, the cafe counter is all broke down. I gotta hold the cup now that you left town, and your hand won't reach my way no more now. The waitress says, honey, it's time to close. I start out walking like the wind that blows down the street that's dark and lonely as a man can be. But I put a pack of sugar in my pocket for tonight, out on the highway when the stars are bright, and that cold wind comes a-whistling through my bones. Thought I saw some headlights for a glow, but it's only the moon shining through the snow. I'm standing in the gravel trying to hitchhike on the wing. But there's a warmth that's left in the coffee cup when the coffee's been all drunk up, so my heart still holds a memory of you. Sweet black coffee is all dry and dry, just the grounds I'm chewing is left behind. And well, that's an old story by now. Getting so doggone old, it's just about worn away. Okay, I am going to end here. I'm going to end with something that Abe Lincoln and I wrote. This goes along with the run-on sentence. Plagiarism is where it's at. All these years, we've deprived ourselves of, writing with our teachers. So, this is a prophecy. When Abraham Lincoln was wearied by the ways of government, sometimes in the evening he would climb a great tree to find some peace and puzzle through the ways of the living. I found him there and asked his help in looking forward. He paused, looked far away, and this is what he said. 87 years from now, our descendants will inherit on this continent an older earth conceived in diversity and dedicated to the recognition that all creatures live as one. Now we are engaged in a great struggle, testing whether this creation, so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met in a great community for that struggle. We have come to dedicate a portion of our grief as a final resting place for those creatures who gave their lives departing from this creation. it is fitting and proper that we should do this. In a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this creation. The desperate creatures, neglected children, vibrant cultures, local ways of being, living, and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The whole earth will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what we now choose to do. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated to the unfinished work which they who struggled and lost here have thus far so painfully clarified. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these tattered beauties we take increased devotion to that cause for which they lost their last full measure of living witness and of song. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not be joined by an endless parade of others long in splendor, suddenly gone, that this whole earth shall have a new birth in welcome to its own, and that reconciliation of all creatures, by all creatures, for all creatures, shall not perish from the earth. Let's hear it for Abe.